everyone, and welcome to this month's CapEd Makes a Podcast. I'm Asia, and today I have Espy.
Hi, everybody.
How are you doing today, Espy?
I'm doing well. How are you?
Good. We have a packed podcast today, so I'm pretty eager to get to it. So, with that being said, I just want to be mindful of time. There are a few things that we need to get to before we introduce Jake Ball. He is the founder and creator of Reader Zone and childrensbookstore.com. So, we have a really cool interview with him coming up. So, a couple things that I wanted to talk about today. I wanted to talk about our Get Give dollars. I wanted to talk about also the 11th annual movie trailer contest that is coming up, and also the fact that we are now having contactless debit cards. So those are a few things that I wanted to touch on. What would you like to take, Espy?
Well, for starters, I think you should start with giving us the updated numbers of Get Give because we surpassed our goal that we had last year, and now it's time for new goals, new updates.
Yeah, we did. And I love that. This is a great update. We are at 215,800. And I just want to remind everybody that what that means is those dollars went directly to local schools, local um, departments within the schools that our members chose. And so for every dollar that goes to the school, that amount also goes back into our members' pockets. So it's a win-win, and we surpassed that goal, and I'm really proud of that. And we wouldn't have been able to do that without our members' help. So that's a really big win for the schools and the educators in the Valley. So that's a really cool goal to hit.
Yes, and just as a reminder for some of our new listeners, with the Get Give, it is part of our high yield checking. It is a promotion that comes with it. You just have to meet qualifications, which are super simple. Everybody, I think, already does all of these things on a regular basis, which is 12 debit card transactions posted by the end of the qualification cycle, as well as e-statements and one direct deposit or ACH going in or out of the account. So super easy. Let's continue supporting our educators, our schools, especially right now with like COVID and a lot of these extra expenses that I feel schools are seeing because of it.
Yeah, that's true. So there's even more need to support those programs. So, yeah, and they can go to caped.com, CU. It's on school resources. They can just look up high yield checking and also the Get 100, Give 100 program. So, if they want more information, they can go there to find that. The next thing that we are happy to talk about is the movie trailer contest. This is our 11th year doing this, and this is such a fun contest for our local students in the 7th through 12th grade. The deadline, I'm coming up with it. The deadline is February, which
17th.
we are in. Thank you. Yes, the 17th. I thought if I drag that out a little bit, you might hop in there. So yes, the 17th, and that's still plenty of time. I mean, kids have so much creativity. They just have all of these tools at their fingertips, and so that's plenty of time for them to create something and get it in. They can learn more. If you're a student listening to this, hop on, a parent, a teacher, capedcu.com/contest for all of the details regarding the movie trailer contest. There's tips, the link to upload it, to all of the rules, all of the prizes are stated there. So just go check that out for some more information.
Yes, and again, the it is submission is due by the 17th of this month, no later than 11:59 p.m. So after that, I believe everything closes down as far as submissions, so get those in there. And last but certainly not least, contactless cards. We're coming with them. We've actually mailed quite a few out. For more information on the benefits of using contactless cards, we have loads of really great info on capedcu.com. I believe it's on our blog.
Yes, that's true. The benefits of contactless cards, it's on the January blog. It's listed there. Um, so, yeah, those are all going out in the month of February for our members' convenience. There is also a link in that blog. I would encourage people to click on that, and that takes you, for those that are concerned about how secure a contactless payment is. We do have a link that goes directly to Visa so that you can look at any of the information there and get any of the questions answered that you might have, as well as, calling our 800 number. We're happy to answer any of those questions. But the blog has some information and it's got some links for you guys there to check it out.
Perfect. Are we ready for our guest speaker?
All right. Hi, guys. I am excited to introduce you guys today to our guest, which is Jake Ball, and he is the founder of childrensbookstore.com and also the creator of the Reader Zone app, which is what we partner with for our Read to Rise program. So we are really excited to have Jake today. So welcome, Jake.
Thank you. It's great to be here.
Do you want to tell us a little bit more about the children's bookstore and how that all got started?
Yeah, you bet. I'd be happy to. Well, thanks for having me again. I really appreciate you taking the time and attention to talk to me.
Yeah,
Children's
absolutely.
children's bookstore kind of came about as a happy accident. In 2005, I was a new father. My son was a year old, and I was actually working as a congressional staffer for Senator Mike Crapo in Caldwell. And my job was to kind of cover the southeast region of the state for the senator. And one of my jobs, and when you have that job, you kind of do everything. But one of my responsibilities was on April 30th, 2005. I had the responsibility to hand out books at a Dia de los Niños event in Caldwell. And if you're not familiar with that is, in Mexico they have the Day of the Child, Dia de los Niños, and it's always April 30th. And they had it at a public park there, and the Senate office had made a partnership with an organization called First Book in Washington, D.C., and they shipped out to us about 1,200 new books. And I was responsible for going and picking up 1,200 books, putting them in my little Volkswagen, driving them to the park, and then schlepping them all the way across the field to my little spot at the Dia de los Niños event. And I
Wow.
was kind of, yeah, and I was kind of put out at the whole thing. Everything was heavy and I didn't have any help. And it was, I was just had a bad attitude, to put it mildly. But I was
That's a
sitting there in
lot
my
of
little
books to
chair.
haul around. That's a lot of weight.
Yeah, it was a lot of weight. It was probably about 800 pounds worth of books.
Oh my gosh.
And so I was sitting there, and the event was supposed to start at like 4 in the afternoon. And I was just surrounded by books. And as people started arriving at the event, families started to arrive. I noticed very quickly that mine was the most popular booth at the thing. And there were literally, the thing that just struck me was that right next to me was a guy giving away free snow cones. Next to him was a popcorn, like a caramel popcorn thing, and all these wonderful treats. And the event was set up so that everything was free for the kids. But I saw kids literally running right past free snow cones and caramel popcorn to get a book.
Wow.
And by the time the event was even supposed to start, my books were gone. And uh, as it was just completely frantic, as I was handing books to hundreds of little hands sticking out to get a book, I finally looked up, and literally all around the park there were kids sitting on the grass with their parents or just sitting alone reading these books. And
That's
it
so
was Yeah, it was very emotional for me because I had never contemplated or understood that there were children in the world who did not own a book. And it was amazing. And in that moment, I became a literacy advocate in 30 seconds, and I quickly became involved with an organization in Canyon County that was raising funds to buy books for low-income families, and that led me to start Children's Bookstore. And Children's Bookstore had the purpose of raising funds. Well, let me back up. Usually these literacy organizations are started by teachers and community volunteers, and they have wonderful intentions, but they have no ability to raise funds for their efforts. And I came from the world of political fundraising, so I thought, well, I know how to raise funds. And so I started Children's Bookstore initially as just an Amazon affiliate site, and we were raising funds for the First Book organization in Canyon County. And that things changed, quickly with the website, and it was fun to see that to develop, and we started donating money to literacy organizations around the country. I still was a full-time congressional staffer, but I had this little side project. And in 2010, uh, it came to a point where I either had to do it full-time or do something with it because it was just taking a lot of time and resources away. So I decided to leave that career, and I moved to childrensbookstore.com full-time. And now we do innovative online book fairs, and we raise funds for schools and libraries literally coast to coast, from Hawaii to Maine, everywhere in between. And we have wonderful publisher relationships, and we have a pretty good website, and it's fun to see how it has developed into this thing. But just in 2020 we raised about $400,000 for schools and libraries across the country, and 2021 it's already on pace to beat that. So it's really fun to see that develop. So that's childrensbookstore.com, and it's always a tech project that requires a lot of attention and time, and it's very expensive to develop, but it's definitely worth it. Um, as I was
That's a
develop,
really moving story about how that got started. And I can't, $400,000, and that's just like for nationwide for schools, like you said, just all over.
all over, yeah, we schools literally all over the place, and it's primarily we raise funds primarily for elementary school and middle school libraries. And our typical situation is a middle school librarian or a elementary librarian or a PTO or a PTA organization reaches out and they want to do an online book fair. And so, they set up their page, and our system is set up such that you can get your own replicated website at childrensbookstore.com. You can put your own logo on it, and recommend a book list and wish list, and then as people buy books, it raises money for the whatever the sponsoring organization is. And at the end of the book fair, we just send a check in the mail to the recipient organization for what they've earned. And yeah, last year it was almost right at $400,000 that we sent, and that buys a lot of books for
Mhm.
libraries across the country. It's really fun to see how schools use the money, and they'll send us photos of all the books they purchased, or sometimes they'll buy computers or whatever the purposes for which they need to raise the funds. They always spend them on really great, purposes that will benefit the entire school community or library community. So it's been a very interesting adventure, something I would never, if you would have talked to me when I was a congressional staffer that I would be a literacy advocate and own a bookstore, you could not have, I, I would have laughed in your face. But I love it. I love books and I love literacy. I just become more and more convinced the older I am that I always say knowledge is the key to success, and the key to knowledge is reading. So if you are not reading, and if a child doesn't have a habit of reading, it's difficult to be successful in an academic environment. And if you can't be successful in an academic environment, it's hard to be successful moving forward. So I just believe reading, and you all know this very well because you run the Read to Rise program and you recognize reading is a very key and important elemental part of any child's development.
Mhm.
That it just has to be done. Um, so that's Children's Bookstore. As I was running Children's Bookstore in 2014, my second son was a third grader, and he brought home, and I'm sure you've seen this, Asia. You've seen your kids bring home this paper reading calendar, and I'm sure your listeners have seen this as well if they send their kids to school. You've seen that?
Oh yeah, of course. And I mean, I don't know if I'm embarrassed or proud, but yeah, my youngest one was like, "Oh no, I just learned how to do your initials, so I put in my own time." So I'm like,
That's
"Well, as
very
long as you're truthful, thank you for taking that off my plate."
yeah, it's very common. But what I know is you've seen that same thing.
Yes.
Primarily, schools and libraries attempt to build a habit of reading and proficiency through this paper reading calendar. They'll send it home typically at the beginning of the month, and they give every kid in the classroom the same assignment to read 600 minutes or whatever the assignment is. And you fill this thing out, you put it in your backpack, and you send it back to the school. But there are some major deficiencies with a paper-based system, and I was experiencing those deficiencies when my son was in third grade because his job was to read 600 minutes a month. Luckily, he was a very diligent student then, and he still is. So every night he would read his minutes, his 20 minutes, take out his pen, write the number in the square on the calendar, then take a push pin and stick it in the wall next to his bed. And he and his brother had a bunk bed. He was on the bottom. And so, you never get into the bunk beds of your kids to see what's going on down there. At least I didn't. But it was right before spring break that I was in the room for some reason. I was probably, I don't know what I was doing, but I noticed that on the wall, there was this push pin stuck there and some of the paint was kind of flaking away. So I pulled the push pin out and I pushed on the drywall, and about a 4-inch square of drywall literally just crumbled out of the wall because
Oh
there was,
my gosh.
because my son had put hundreds of holes in the
Uh-huh.
wall with this push pin.
He made the wall Swiss cheese just from
Yeah.
keeping track of his reading.
Yeah, which he was very diligent. But the thing that irritated me, but the thing that irritated me more was that we would meticulously gather this data. We would write it on a sheet of paper, sign the bottom of the paper, send it to the school, and then it seemed like that data just flew off into space. And again, that's the deficiency with the paper reading calendar is if you are collecting data on a sheet of paper, it's almost impossible to analyze and aggregate that data in any way that's useful for the sponsoring organization. Another thing that's almost impossible to do is to run a reading program within a classroom that meets the children where they are. By that I mean, in any given classroom of 30 kids, you'll have approximately 10 kids who are what we would call it advanced readers. They read way above grade level. You have about 10 to 12 kids who are hover around grade level, and then you have the bottom third of kids who are struggling with proficiency at grade level. And typically what happens is a teacher or a librarian will give the same reading assignment to all 30 kids. And in that exercise, they leave the bottom half behind or the bottom third behind because this is not a goal that is reasonable for them. The middle third is kind of where they gear the program to, and then the top third, it's way too easy. Um, and the other deficiency with the paper reading calendar is that we know that most parents of today's children are millennials, and they're not interested in holding on to a sheet of paper for a month or
Yeah.
managing a sheet of paper on the fridge or whatever they want. They interact with the world through their mobile devices. So I had this idea that we could take the reading paper reading log and move it into a virtual environment. And that's how ReaderZone was born. And I developed the first iteration of it in 2014 and put it out in the world. And it got a little bit of traction. And since then, we've just been developing it as quickly as we can and adding features and troubleshooting and trying to make it work. And at present, we have ReaderZone customers in 23 foreign countries and in every US state. Um, and in any given day, we have anywhere between 500 and 700,000 minutes logged within the system, system-wide throughout our entire network, and thousands of books, and it's really fun to see that develop. But
Yeah,
what
that's
readers?
amazing.
What's that?
It's just amazing that it's it's so big that, and it's being used for exactly what it was developed for. So that's really cool to hear.
that we're doing. Yeah, it's what I would call a purpose-built tool. I built it to replace the paper reading calendar. That's its job. And and we've added a lot of features and a lot of tools to it that make it a little more interesting. But that was the initial problem I was trying to solve. And so it's, we are in a constant state of development, as you know, Asia. You all have used it with CapEd for, I think this is the third year, and you've seen a lot of changes and updates, and we've troubleshot, bugs that you've come up, and it's been an adventure. And building software is, if anybody were to come to me with advice with regard to whether or not they should build a software platform, I would just tell them to go sell insurance instead.
Yeah, well, I mean, and you're always developing it to make it even more user friendly and adding other elements to it that bring more excitement and like rewards for the kids. So it seems like it's, ever changing, but obviously in a positive way.
Yeah, I hope so. But that's the purpose of Reader Zone is to, and the real goal of it, I say, is building cultures of reading. Um, and I always say that a culture is based, whatever that culture is, on two pillars. You have to have a practice, and then you have to have information. So if you want to build a culture of reading, you have to first have a practice of reading within, a community, a school community, or a library community, or a family, whatever it is. And then you have to have information. So, I mean, just thinking about how Reader Zone has been deployed kind of in larger environments, last summer we did summer reading for 106 individual libraries in the state of Nebraska, and they were all on one Reader Zone account. And they started their programs on June 1, and by the 4th of July, they, as a group, had logged more than 1 million minutes of reading. And it was really fun for them because they developed a press release. They sent the press release out to local media in the state. They got an interview on NPR, and they talked about this wonderful accomplishment that kids throughout the state were doing. And by the end of the summer, they ended up logging about 1.8 million minutes of reading. And this was all the smallest libraries throughout the state. It didn't include Omaha or Lincoln. It was just the rural parts of Nebraska, which is essentially everywhere but Omaha and Lincoln. But when you have a practice of reading, that's one thing. But when you can report on that reading, that's a totally different scenario. And I always talk about what it looks like if a child enters an elementary school on their first day of kindergarten. And they enter that school knowing that this is a school of readers. And we know we're a school of readers because last year we read as a group, 35,000 books and 1.2 million minutes of reading. And you just entered an environment where you are a reader. And this is what we do here at XYZ School. You have to have the practice of reading, and most schools and organizations do a really good practice of reading where they have like these paper reading calendars or whatever the system is by which they deploy and then have kids read. But the reporting part is what typically is lacking, and they just don't know as a group what they've accomplished. And when you can report on what you have done as a group, then all of a sudden you have that culture because you are reporting back to your families and your stakeholders that this is what we've done, this is what we're doing, look how amazing we are. And that's what I attempt to do with Reader Zone, is give the ability to build the practice of reading by deploying these reading programs, and then give the organizers the ability to report on their success back to their stakeholders, and so that they can see how great they are. And I think you all have done that very well with the contest that you have. And I'm sure, AJ, I'm not sure if your listeners know exactly what the Read to Rise program entails, but that's all based on information.
Right.
You are gathering this information and then reporting back out to your stakeholders their success, and that's very powerful. It doesn't seem like it is like it's that big of a deal in real time, but when you are able to um, see what the impact is, going back and you can look at your schools that have been successful with your Read Your Eyes program in the past, they've had the opportunity of building that culture of reading and taking kids who may not have typically uh, thought they were readers, who now think that they are a reader. And even if they don't actually read a lot, if they just have the notion that they're a reader, that opens the door so that later in life they continue to read and continue to be, a habitual reader, which is what we're kind of after. So,
Yeah. Well, I love that you worded it as a practice. And so that's just on point that, starting school, maybe it hasn't been a habit of theirs and then now it's becoming a practice. And so I love that you worded it that way. I do love the app for the measurability of it to be able to see the school's progress from one season, one school year to the next. So that's also really, really exciting. And I love that the parents can go in, to the app and be able to see that same exact data of their children of like, oh, look, you did this many minutes last school year, look where you are now, like you're becoming more of an avid reader, like this is now starting to be exactly like what you said, their practice. So that's really good information and data for the parent also.
oh, absolutely. And I always think that, and part of the app is that we have this activity feed where you can see all of your reading entries in the books you finished,
Mhm.
in chronological order. So if you want to prove to your child that they're a reader, you pull up the app and then you show them everything they've read, and it just validates what they've been doing. And that's very powerful. Just as
Mhm.
an example, my um, second grader last summer, he's not the most excitable reader you'll ever meet. He's just a typical kid. But my wife told him, if you read 1,000 minutes, we'll go get a Lego set for you. And guess what? He was motivated. So he was motivated to the point that he was going to go to Wyoming with his grandparents for 3 or 4 days, just he and his grandparents. And
Mhm.
he told us he was kind of dragging his feet, which was weird because he loves to be with them. we we finally said, Luke, what's going on? And he broke down. He said, I can't. If I go to Wyoming, I will miss my minutes. And we said, oh, no, no, no. We'll give Grandpa the app and he can log your minutes so you don't miss it. So
Yeah.
finally he was, he was, but the incentives are very important. And in your Read Your Eyes program, CapEd has this really great, if you all haven't seen it who are listening, they have these really great badges they've built that as kids reach reading milestones, they unlock these badges. And the funny thing about, well, I guess people in general and kids in particular is that they respond very well to incentives. So if you, it doesn't matter what the incentive is. It can be just a digital sticker, or it can
Yeah.
be, a milkshake. It doesn't matter as long as they can earn something and feel like they've accomplished whatever they've set out to do. That's what's important. So CapEd has built these really cool badges that as readers reach milestones in minutes, they unlock these badges and they can see what they've done. And again, like you said, Asia, with the parents, if you want to build that culture of reading, and you can remind your kids to read, then you can scroll through the app and show them everything they've accomplished. All of a sudden, you're proving to them that they're a reader. You have what we, in the nonprofit world, they call it proof of mission, right? That
Mhm.
you actually want to prove that you're doing what you say you're going to do.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. It's just so important for them. You're right that it's really important for the child to be able to see themselves that this was your accomplishment. Like maybe you don't think that you've made great progress, but you really have. And here it is in front of you and you can see it. And so that's a really cool visual for them.
mhm. Yeah, you're proving it to them. If they say, I'm not a reader, you say, oh, yeah? Let me show you. Let me
Mhm.
show you what you've done. And again, those incentives are powerful.
Yeah, we love that.
Yeah, it doesn't. It's always when we build these reading programs, or we see how public libraries, our typical users are public libraries, but public libraries have such a huge variety of incentives they roll out, and some of them are ultra complex and difficult to get your head around what they're even trying to do. Like I had a library um, in Kansas reach out because they were trying to deploy a Monopoly game within the Reader's Own app as the awards. And as a librarian explained it to me, I couldn't get my head around it. So I talked to her. I said, well, what you can do is just pull that back and make it very simple for your people. So we talked about how to pull all the difficult elements out of it and just, give people, if people can see from point A to point B very clearly and they know exactly what they need to get there, all of a sudden that pathway is much easier to walk down.
Yeah.
So it's that the incentives are important. Um, you could give away a Kia Sportage or a milkshake, but if your rules to get the Kia Sportage are more complicated than there to get the milkshake, you're probably going to give away more milkshakes than Kias. That's what I
Right,
would say.
that's true. I do love that we do have those virtual badges set up because they're just milestones that the child receives. And there's not necessarily one end goal per se. They just kind of get that little cheer at,
Yeah,
during the entire process. So we love that.
yeah, they get that acknowledgement that they have accomplished something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, let's see here. I do have a question that came in, Jake.
Oh wow.
Um, do you, do you have any concerns about children not reading enough, and or are you optimistic that they're going to continue? What are your thoughts on that?
Oh, that's a good question. I always this comes up quite a bit because people, childrensbookstore.com, we only sell paper books. We don't do any virtual books.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you that, if you look at media reports, you would think that people aren't reading as much as they used to, or book sales are down. But industry-wide, the number of hard copy children's books that are sold in the United States year on year has never decreased since they started tracking it in the 1880s. Um, and in 2021 in particular, when libraries were closed or difficult to access, book sales went way up. I mean, the book industry, if you look at the graph, 2020 is going to be this point that's way up there. Um, and I do, that said, I am always concerned that kids don't read as much as they used to, not because it's hard for me to track down what the exact data is. The thing that is disheartening about our modern world is that if kids aren't given a book, their imagination is not exercised. And if you think about what kids typically do, when you see a 2-year-old or a 4-year-old or an eighth grader or whatever using an iPad or playing a video game, that interaction delivers to the child 100% of the sensory experience. Just gives them the video, the audio, and the emotional tie to it. And which essentially makes it such that their imagination literally doesn't have enough space in their brain to operate. When you give a child a book, they have to read a book. They have to imagine what's happening in their mind. So I think kids are reading as much as they used to, but I don't think that they are um, having that alone, quiet reading experience where they are getting into a story. And the hard evidence for that is that if you look industry wide, there is the graphic novel has just surged in popularity over the past 10 years. And the graphic novel is one where, you know, the picture is there, the story is there, and it follows along. And again, that kind of cuts into the amount of imaginative work that could be done within a child's brain as well. So yes, I am generally concerned about how much reading is done. Um, I can't tell you how much more is done than has been in the past. There's lots of studies on that are conflicting, but um, as a parent, if you're worried about whether or not your child is reading, um, the questions I always ask, well, there's always parents come to me with a question. They'll say, "When should I start reading to my child?" And the answer to that question is today. There's no other time. Whether your child is 8 years old or, you know, 8 months from being born today.
I like
Number two, I always ask parents, "What are you reading?" And if they kind of get shocked and they don't have a book that they're reading, I say, "Well, if you're not reading a book, how can you expect your child to read?"
yeah.
Um, I always do the example of I'm disappointed, or I can't be disappointed if my children don't grow up to be NASCAR drivers because I have not exposed them to NASCAR at all. Zero. They have zero exposure to NASCAR. So if you are expecting your child to grow up to be a reader and you're not exposing them and modeling reading behavior, then you really don't have or should not have an expectation that they're going to be a reader. So I always say, go home, sit in a conspicuous spot in your home, get a book and read it. And your children are going to walk by and they're going to see you reading, and you're going to give them tacit permission to read a book. Um, a lot of parents always come to me and they have reluctant readers, and that's very common. Especially if kids are used to an iPad that is much more exciting than a printed book. But I always tell them, if you have a reluctant reader, go to the library or a bookstore and tell your child to go find 2 books that they want to read. And don't give them any judgment with regard to what they bring back. And you'll be surprised at what your children come back with. Like, as an example, my second son, for like 4 years, all he read was books about football. That was it. And it was funny. It's some books that I would not have chosen or chosen for him, but that's what he liked. So the other part, the corollary to that is your children are going to come back with whatever subject area they're interested in, and you might be surprised. But the other part of that is as your child is reading that book, ask them about it. Ask them what they're learning or what the plot is or whatever. Just ask them about the book they're reading, and it'll be interesting. Children want to show off what they know, and so if you give them an opportunity to show off about what they're learning in the book or what their book's about, it'll be interesting, and you might drop your jaw a little bit with regard to how much your child is interested in the book or the story they're after. That was a long answer to a short question. So
No, I thought it was so great. I mean, there just was such good advice or recommendation. And, I think some of the things, even as a parent myself, maybe we just get complacent with things or we get in our own habit. And, sometimes even when those calendars come home that, oh, you have to read because you have to get your minutes in. And I really do love the idea of just taking the outside stimuli and just going to a bookstore or just going to a library and letting them pick out what interests them just for the love of reading. And I love, that you had said also about letting them use their imagination for those things. So that's really great advice for our listeners, and I appreciate that you had worded it so eloquently. So
oh,
that was really great. Thank you very much for that.
thank you. Yeah, I always say that the best. I speak to education groups every now and again about building cultures of reading in the home. And I like to have a group of teachers or educators or whatever, and I ask the question, what is the best tool you have to build readers? And smart ones will raise their hand. They'll talk about some software platform, and they'll raise their hand and say, we have this in our library or that or this. And then eventually you'll see somebody in their raise their hand and they'll say, well, we have our ears. And I say, yes, your most important tool in building a reader is your ears, because you need to listen to your child and understand where they are in their proficiency, give them reading materials that's going to match what they can comfortably read,
Mhm.
and then follow their interests and feed that interest. Um, it's so important. My eight, I guess my now 8-year-old, we just got through reading the second Harry Potter book together, and that was really fun. But
Mhm.
that's what he's interested in, so you got to feed that interest. So sorry, you didn't ask that question. I'm just kind of going off here.
No, no, I love that. I mean, those are inspiring things to get us to stop and think about, how we can do better for our readers in our lives. So I appreciate those stories. Well, is there anything else that you want to touch on? I think that you had such great information, and I'm really happy to have had you on. I will just plug our Read to Rise really quick. At CapEd, yeah, we have a Read to Rise program, and it goes from December 1st to April 1st, and it's for the elementary school age children. They can go to our Read to Rise. They can find that at capedcu.com/read. And there's some more information about our program that we have partnered with you with the Reader Zone app, which is so easy to use. It's totally user friendly. And the parent just goes on and signs up their children or child under the group, which is their school name. And they're able to then just track their minutes from there. And so that's a really easy to use tool that we have thanks to you.
Well, thank you. Yeah, the I'll just plug that as well. I think the Read to Rise program is it's a unique utilization of the Readers on platform among all of the people who use it for us, and it's really great to see how CapEd is endeavoring to build that culture of reading across their entire area of impact. And it's really a great program. They have a lot of you all have built some wonderful incentives both for the readers and for the participating schools. And as you mentioned, Asia, it goes through April 1st, but you can jump in anytime. So you can join the reading program today and start logging your reading today. And you're working for your school, and hopefully we can get a lot of great outcomes out of this. That's the goal.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, absolutely. They don't have to have signed up from December. They can go today, tomorrow, anytime. They can jump in at any time. And the one thing that CapEd is offering the schools this year, it's really cool. So generally what we do is the top 5 schools that have the most average read minutes per student participation. Kind of a mouthful. I hope that's understandable. We would generally bring our Read to Rise balloon out and Edward, our bookworm, which is our reading ambassador puppet, and we would read to the younger children, and the older children would take part and maybe folding the balloon out. But every child then gets to see this huge balloon inflation, and it's so exciting. And so this year we actually have cash prizes that we are awarding to the top 5 schools so that they can build their library and just continue to encourage that reading. So that is the one change, the one exciting change that we have this year. So we definitely want the schools to participate and the parents to just really get behind their children and encourage their reading.
Yeah, and that's the goal, right? Jump in anytime.
Exactly. Exactly. Well, it was such a pleasure, and I learned so much about the children's bookstore. So I'm really happy for all of that information, and I'm really grateful for your time that you took today. So I just want to thank you for that. And we had a really great time with you. So thanks, Jake.
And thank you, Asia. It was great to be here.
For more information on our Get Give program and our commercial lending products and services, please check out our website at capedcu.com. Share accounts are insured by NCUA.